Let me tell you about a guy named Eric. Eric spent 3 years building his startup. He had the pitch deck. He had the prototype. He even had a waitlist of 400 people who said they wanted it. He launched on a Tuesday morning. By Friday, nothing. Not a single paying customer. The waitlist? Ghost town. Eric did everything right, and it still didn't work. Now here's the thing. Eric's story isn't a failure story. It's a warning story. Because in 2026, thousands of people are doing exactly what Eric did. Smart people, hard-working people, people who read the books, watch the talks, studied the case studies, and they're still failing. Not because they're stupid, not because they're lazy, but because they're playing by the old rules in a completely new game. So today, we're going to talk about what that game actually looks like now, what changed, what didn't, and most importantly, what separates the founders who win from the ones who quietly disappear. Stay with me, because this is going to hit different. Let's start with a question nobody asks, but everybody should. When did building a startup get easy? Because think about what it took in 2010. You needed a technical co-founder. You needed money to spin up servers. You needed a team just to write the back end. A basic MVP, minimum viable product, could take 6 months and $100,000. Now, you can build a functioning product in a weekend, with AI, without code, without a co-founder, without a team. I've watched 22-year-olds launch tools in 48 hours that a decade ago would have required a Series A to build. The barriers to entry didn't lower. They essentially collapsed. And that sounds like great news. For a second, it feels like the most democratic moment in the history of entrepreneurship. Like the playing field finally leveled out. But here's where most people stop thinking, and where we need to go deeper. Because when the cost of entry goes to near zero, the number of players goes to near infinite. And that changes everything downstream. It's like the moment Spotify made music distribution free for every artist. Sounds amazing, right? More music for everyone. Except, what actually happened? The number of songs released per year exploded from a few 100,000 to over 100 million. And listener attention? It didn't grow at the same rate. The same dynamic is now happening in startups. More builders. Same amount of customer attention. Same amount of trust. Same number of problems worth solving. That's the world Eric didn't see coming. And honestly, most founders today still don't see it. So if building is easy, what's hard? I want you to really sit with that question, because the honest answer is uncomfortable. What's hard is being noticed. What's hard is being trusted. What's hard is getting someone to care enough, just enough, to give you 5 minutes of their attention. Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, the most prestigious startup accelerator in the world, once said that the number one mistake early founders make is spending too much time building and not enough time talking to users. That was true 10 years ago. Today, it's not just a mistake. It's a death sentence. Because here's what the data actually shows. According to CB Insights, which analyzed the postmortems of over 300 failed startups, the number one reason startups fail isn't technical. It isn't financial. It's that they built something nobody wanted. Not nobody was interested. Not nobody could afford it. Nobody wanted it. Think about what that means. These teams, sometimes years of work, sometimes millions of dollars, built things that didn't solve a real pain point. They were in love with their solution before they ever confirmed there was a problem. But in 2026, there's a second layer to this that's even more dangerous. Even if you build something people want, if you can't cut through the noise to reach them, you still lose. Distribution is no longer an afterthought. It is the game. I've seen technically inferior products win markets because the team understood distribution. And I've seen genuinely brilliant products die in obscurity because the founders thought good work would speak for itself. It won't. It never did. But now it especially won't. Here's something I think about a lot. Attention is the new venture capital. If you have it, you can raise real money, find customers, recruit talent, survive mistakes. If you don't have it, you're basically invisible, regardless of how good your product is. Here's what's genuinely fascinating about startups failing in 2026. The reasons haven't changed that much. They've just put on new clothes: bad timing, weak distribution, founder ego, misaligned incentives. These aren't new problems, but the way they manifest, that's evolved. Take timing. In the 90s, being too early killed Webvan, a grocery delivery startup that raised almost $1 billion and went bankrupt before Amazon Prime Pantry existed. The idea was right. The infrastructure wasn't there. The consumer behavior wasn't there. Today, timing still matters, but the cycles are compressed. What used to be a 5-year window is now 18 months. Markets saturate faster. User expectations evolve faster. A product that was innovative in January can feel outdated by September. Then there's founder psychology, and this one is underrated. Stanford researchers studying entrepreneurial behavior found that founders consistently overestimate the uniqueness of their idea by something like 40%. They underestimate how many other people are working on similar things, and they dramatically overestimate how much early traction predicts long-term success. That's not a criticism. It's almost a requirement for founding anything. You have to be somewhat delusional to start a company. The problem is when that delusion becomes a filter that blocks real feedback. I've talked to founders who had 20 user interviews telling them the product needed a pivot, and they kept building anyway, because they were convinced the users just didn't understand the vision yet. That's not conviction. That's denial. And in a market where the feedback loop between launch and obsolescence is measured in months, not years, denial is fatal. The hard truth is this: technology changed, but human nature didn't. We still fall in love with our own ideas. We still avoid hard conversations. We still build for ourselves instead of building for markets. The tools got better. The emotional patterns stayed the same. And that gap between better tools and unchanged psychology is where most startups die quietly. All right, let's talk about what actually works. Because this isn't just a diagnosis. I want to leave you with something you can actually use. If you look at the startups that are winning right now, and I mean genuinely winning, not just raising money, but building sustainable businesses with real customers, a few patterns show up consistently. First, they treat speed as a strategy, not a side effect. Figma released updates so fast in their early days that competitors couldn't even finish analyzing one release before the next one dropped. Notion shipped experimental features publicly while competitors were still in internal beta. Fast iteration isn't about being sloppy. It's about treating the market as your real R&D lab. Second, they build distribution into the product itself. Dropbox, Slack, Calendly, Duolingo. Each of these products has a mechanism that spreads itself. Dropbox gives you more storage for every friend you invite. Calendly puts a link in your email signature. Duolingo sends you notifications that make you feel guilty for missing a day, which ironically makes you talk about it. If your product doesn't spread itself in some way, you're paying a tax every day to acquire every single user. And most startups can't afford that tax for long enough. Third, they focus relentlessly on a specific, painful problem for a specific, reachable group. Not everyone with a productivity problem. Not businesses in general. A specific person with a specific pain that they already feel every day and would pay to make stop. The more narrow your initial focus, the faster you can get to product-market fit. And once you have that fit, you can expand. But you can't expand from nothing. And fourth, maybe the most important, they ship before they're ready. Reid Hoffman, who co-founded LinkedIn, has a line that gets quoted a lot. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you launched too late. That sounds like a quip. It's actually a survival principle. Because the only way to know if something works is to put it in front of real people. Not your friends, not your family, real strangers with no obligation to be kind. The startups that win in 2026 are the ones who treat every launch not as a finish line, but as the beginning of a real conversation. So here's where I want to leave you. The real shift in 2026 isn't technological, it's epistemological. What I mean is, the founders who win aren't necessarily smarter, better funded, or more experienced than the ones who lose. They just learn faster. In public, in real time, in front of people who are watching and judging and deciding whether to trust them. Everything is visible now. Every product, every pivot, every failure. There's no stealth anymore, not in any real sense. Someone is always watching. Someone is always building the same thing. Someone is always one iteration ahead of where you are, which means the compounding advantage goes to whoever can run the loop, build, ship, learn, adapt, faster than everyone else. And I know that sounds exhausting. It is exhausting, but it's also clarifying, because it means the game isn't about who has the best idea anymore. It's about who has the most honest relationship with reality. Remember Eric from the beginning? After that failed launch, he did something most founders don't. He picked up the phone and called every single person on his wait list, not to pitch them, to ask them why they hadn't bought. What he found out changed everything. The problem he was solving was real. The solution he built was fine, but the way he was selling it, the language, the framing, the channel, was all wrong. He rebuilt the onboarding in a weekend, changed the pricing structure, updated the copy, relaunched 3 weeks later. First week, 11 paying customers. Not a lot, but real. By month 3, 64. Eric didn't get smarter between the first launch and the second one. He just got honest with himself. That's the truth about building a startup in 2026. It's easier to start than it's ever been, but harder to win than it's ever been. And the gap between those two things, that's not a gap in resources or talent or even luck. That gap is made of honesty, speed, and the willingness to learn in public over and over again until something finally clicks. Good luck out there. You're going to need it, and you're going to earn it.